Imminent. SpaceX's Golden Key, the Crew Dragon spacecraft, is set to bring two stranded Starliner astronauts safely back home. This mission not only highlights the extraordinary success of Dragon, but also serves as a stark reminder of Boeing Starliner's bleeding wound after failing the first mission. When will the two Starliner astronauts finally get rescued? While Starliner falters, how far ahead has SpaceX's Dragon come? Let's find out on today's episode of Alpha Tech. SpaceX's Crew Dragon has been a resounding success for both the company and NASA's Commercial Crew program. After ending a 9-year gap in U.S. crewed launch capability, the spacecraft has become the de facto leader in the growing commercial orbital economy. In addition to rotating NASA crews to the ISS, Crew Dragon has completed 5 privately funded missions to date, with crews ranging from international astronauts to SpaceX employees. This triumph sets a high bar for any spacecraft in the U.S., and so far, none have come close to replacing it. However, in light of SpaceX's dominance in crewed launches, NASA, the leading U.S. space agency, has expressed dissatisfaction with the monopoly and hopes Starliner and other spacecraft can join in diversifying the market. Sadly, Starliner has not only failed to formally enter the ISS race, but has also earned the reputation of a cursed spacecraft, stranding astronauts on the ISS and forcing Crew Dragon to come to the rescue. Starliner's first crewed flight was planned for June of 23. Astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams were scheduled to spend 8 to 10 days aboard the station. However, multiple issues with Starliner raised NASA's concerns, leading them to leave the astronauts on the ISS as a precaution. The spacecraft returned to Earth unmanned in September. That same month, SpaceX's Crew Dragon launched with a crew of 2 astronauts in 2 empty seats, specifically to bring Wilmore and Williams back to the Earth in February of this year. Crew 9 marked SpaceX's 15th crewed launch, including 8 previous ISS crewed rotation missions, the Demo 2 test flight for NASA, 3 private astronaut missions to the ISS for Axiom, and the private Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn missions. This Crew 9 mission underscores SpaceX's remarkable success and Boeing's glaring failure in fulfilling its commercial crew contract. The Dragon spacecraft for the mission, named Freedom, carried just 2 astronauts to the ISS instead of the usual 4, leaving 2 seats open for Wilmore and Williams' return journey. The empty seats on Freedom are a stark reminder of how poorly Boeing was handling its commercial crew contract, highlighting SpaceX's extraordinary triumph over a company with over a century of aerospace history. This mission further cements the shift from the old guard to the rise of the new space era, led by SpaceX. On a broader scale, the mission symbolizes a peaceful collabo between Americans and Russians to rescue the 2 NASA astronauts. Despite geopolitical tensions here on Earth, this cooperation showcases the apolitical nature of space exploration and offers a hopeful vision of peace and unity in pursuing humanity's loftiest goals. As for Starliner, NASA and Boeing have yet to announce concrete solutions for the issues encountered during its first crewed flight, including helium tanks and propulsion system malfunctions. An October press conference was held to address these problems, but the outcome was vague and failed to provide clear answers, reflecting the slow pace of Boeing's post-launch evaluations. We're just starting that, just trying to understand how to correct and rectify the issues that are on the table, said Richard Jones, Deputy Program Manager of NASA's Commercial Crew Program at Johnson Space Center in Houston. The schedule associates with how long and what will be required in that area in front of us, and we'll be working hard on that to know. This means Dragon will remain the sole vehicle handling all crewed launches, at least through the end of this year. Given Boeing's Starliner's sluggish pace of research and development, this outcome is indisputable. Although some solutions have been proposed, it's likely that the next crewed flight, whether Starliner 1 or another test, will be delayed until late this year or even next. This delay significantly diminishes the chances of completing all 6 crewed missions under Boeing's 2014 contract, especially with just 5 years left on the ISS's planned retirement, also jeopardizing the potential nearly $2 billion in revenue that NASA could give for those missions. In 2014, NASA gave Boeing a contract worth $4.2 billion. Subsequent amendments governments have added $400 million to the agreement. To date, $2.7 billion has been paid, leaving almost $2 billion for future services on operational flights. However, this figure still exceeds the $1.5 billion loss Boeing's already incurred on the program. NASA has yet to decide whether to require Boeing to conduct another test flight to ensure safety before certifying Starliner for operational missions. Any decision, whether yes or no, will involve a trade-off between safety and time. Currently, only 3 of 6 contracted missions have been confirmed as ordered. In theory, NASA places these orders 2 to 3 days before the mission launches. Therefore, Boeing may only complete a maximum of 3 missions within the 6 years remaining before the ISS's retirement in 2030. On the other hand, if NASA allows Boeing to prepare additional Starliner missions beyond the 3 that are already on the books, this would conflict with NASA's existing plans. SpaceX, for instance, wants to introduce the 5th Crew Dragon spacecraft to its fleet next year. NASA wants to order more Dragon missions in addition to the 14 already contracted under SpaceX's Commercial Crew Agreement. As a result, the agency only needs a handful of Starliner flights to maintain a full staffing on the ISS through the end of the decade. That said, Starliner in any scenario remains kind of outdated machine with no real future. While Boeing struggles to keep it operational, SpaceX's Dragon has evolved into an entire fleet, with plans for impressive upgrades set to roll out in the new year. Each second-gen Dragon spacecraft is assigned a serial number in the form of C2XX, encompassing both Crew Dragon and Cargo Dragon. 3 Crew Dragon prototypes were built under the names C201 to C203, along with 2 more that are no longer operational. C204, which got destroyed in a test following its Demo 1 flight to the ISS, and then C205, which only flew during an in-flight abort test. The current active fleet includes C206 Endeavour, which first flew Demo 2, C207 Resilience, Crew 1, C210 Endurance, which debuted for Crew 3, and then C212 Freedom, which first flew Crew 4. C208, 209, and 211 are unnamed cargo Dragons. SpaceX initially halted the production of Dragon spacecraft in March of 2022 after completing Freedom, capping the fleet at 4 Crew Dragons. However, just a few months later, in November 2022, SpaceX announced plans to build a 5th spacecraft, C213, citing increased demand from both government and commercial sectors. Despite this, the company made it clear that it prefers to operate with a fixed Dragon fleet as it redirects resources towards Starship, envisioned as the all-purpose vehicle for SpaceX's future needs. In 2020, NASA and SpaceX began exploring the reuse of Crew Dragon and Cargo Dragon for NASA missions, initially targeting 5 flights of spacecraft. Spacecraft with the highest flight counts were excluded from NASA missions, a policy also applied to the company's Falcon 9 boosters. Today, Endeavour leads the fleet with 5 flights and is currently docked at the ISS for NASA's Crew 8 mission, a notable departure from earlier policies. However, Endeavour's future missions remain unconfirmed, and it's expected to retire upon its return. Meanwhile, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom have each completed 3 flights. In March of this year, NASA and SpaceX expressed interest in extending the operational lifespan of each Crew Dragon to up to 15 flights. This plan depends on the results of an ongoing certification campaign, including an analysis of Endeavour after its return to Earth. If successful, Endeavour and its counterparts could remain operational well into the latter half of the decade. This extension will proceed cautiously due to the added complexities. Currently, only 1 Dragon spacecraft, Freedom, is certified to rotate NASA crews to the ISS. With Crew Dragon, SpaceX has secured a coveted place in commercial spaceflight, the first provider to offer orbital crew missions to private customers independently of the government. For these missions, SpaceX has free rein to customize the vehicle as it pleases, to suit its own needs or those of its customers. For example, after flying Crew 1, Resilience had its docking port replaced with a transparent cupola dome after the private Inspiration 4 mission. Subsequently, Resilience received an airlock hatch to support EVAs during Polaris Dawn. But these changes aren't entirely without consequence. NASA will not fly ISS crews aboard any modified Crew Dragon. This policy excludes Resilience from future ISS rotations due to the changes that SpaceX has made to support other customers. In August, SpaceX revealed the upcoming FRAM-2 mission, a private research flight to a high-inclination orbit that'll study the Earth's poles. In a poetic twist, FRAM-2, named for the historic polar exploration vessel FRAM, will fly aboard Endurance, which also shares its name with a polar ship. Like Resilience, Endurance will receive a cupola for the mission and will likewise exit NASA's approved ISS rotation fleet. Between Endeavour reaching its current flight limit and the departure of Resilience and Endurance, Freedom's the only Dragon spacecraft currently available to fly NASA astronauts and is accordingly slated to fly Crew 9 later this month. This simple fact puts pressure on SpaceX to make the most of its remaining NASA-certified fleet. Analysis of Endeavour to support a lifetime extension will likely continue to next year. Meanwhile, fifth Crew Dragon, the unnamed C-213, is still under construction. C-213 was originally planned to fly the 11th U.S. crew vehicle slot, USCV-11, late next year, while Starliner would fly its first rotation, Starliner-1, as USCV-10. But the schedule disruption caused by the uncrewed return of Starliner CFT has compelled SpaceX to support the 10th slot as Crew 10 in February of this year, 6 months earlier than planned. Now, not much is known about the status of C-213. After its announcement in 2022, the spacecraft got planned to be operational last year, although until very recently its flight was set for late this year. If for any reason the spacecraft can't be completed and certified before Crew 10, SpaceX could potentially push Endeavour to bridge the gap pending its post-flight analysis. In either case, the margin's going to be close to bringing a second Crew Dragon back to service for NASA. If SpaceX and NASA approve additional flights for each vehicle, the pressure will be significantly reduced, putting Crew Dragon on an even footing with Starliner as Boeing plans to complete its ISS obligations using just 2 spacecraft. Furthermore, if Starliner can start rotations next year, NASA-certified Dragon spacecraft only need to fly once a year. Still, questions remain for Dragon's manifest. While SpaceX will most likely be able to restore its ISS fleet to 2 spacecraft in short order, commercial customers complicate the situation. Axiom Space's 4th private astronaut mission, AX-4, is set to launch to the ISS next spring, likely requiring either Freedom or C-213. Vast Space's Haven 1 station could launch late next year, and Crew Dragon's on the books to transport its first crew. As a private mission, VAS-1 could also use Resilience or Endurance, though either would need to be re-equipped with a standard docking port. Looking even further ahead, Dragon's prospects seem bright. In 4 years, as the only American system capable of sending crew to LEO, Crew Dragon's garnered some serious attention from other commercial players. Future LEO destinations like Axiom Station, Starlab, Orbital Reef, or VAST stations have an exceptionally well-proven option in SpaceX, whereas Boeing's troubled Starliner may yet struggle to be commercially attractive. Crew Dragon's also demonstrated its utility to conduct free-flying research, which NASA anticipates will be a key part of the commercial LEO ecosystem. With such a bountiful demand, will 5 Crew Dragons be enough? The future of humans in LEO is hard to know, but it seems the next generation of commercial activity could persist for decades. Crew Dragon's a shoo-in for this market, yet SpaceX's attention lies elsewhere. Starship's the company's mission statement incarnate, but its usefulness as a crew shuttle is tenuous. Much larger than the Space Shuttle and outsized for even the most ambitious commercial stations, Starship is a bit of an awkward fit for Dragon's niche. Factor in an uncertain schedule and avant-garde risk posture, and Starship seems unlikely to dethrone SpaceX's golden goose anytime soon. For now, Crew Dragon's place in the world is clear. Despite the challenges of the past, Crew Dragon has but one final maze to navigate as the year draws to a close. After years of bearing the load of U.S. crew access, the commercial crew program's original mission of dissimilar redundancy may finally come to pass next year, and Crew Dragon may in turn relax into its final legacy serving the ISS. Nearly a week has passed since the Starship Flight 7 mission, yet we can't help but marvel at what SpaceX has accomplished. Perhaps the most striking aspect is the explosion of Starship 33, a dramatic event that has captured global attention. However, is this truly the disaster that the media has portrayed it to be? The data from the explosion of Starship's 7th flight has shown us how the rocket was destroyed. The success of Booster 14 was evident and required little discussion. The more pressing issue lies with Starship 33, which SpaceX has poured immense effort into refining and upgrading, aiming to set new records only for it to unexpectedly explode. From the very beginning of the launch, Starship appeared to exhibit suboptimal performance. At around 1 minute 30 seconds into the flight, camera footage showed a shield made of an unidentified material detaching and fluttering in the wind. While this was not a direct cause of Ship 33's explosion, in many cases, such an issue could pose a potential risk to cargo flights and result in more severe damage during re-entry. Hopefully, this minor flaw will be effectively addressed in Starship's next launch. The problems didn't stop there. Starship continued its descent, and at the 8-minute mark after liftoff, one of Ship 33's sea-level Raptor engines failed. Shortly after, flames became visible on the hull of the vehicle, suggesting a fire already underway. While some flames on the outer body near the engine vents can be expected, their persistence in this case was a clear sign of trouble. As the flight progressed, 2 more engines failed, and by the 8-minute mark, it was evident something was seriously wrong. Methane levels on the ship dropped rapidly, further hinting at a potential leak somewhere on the vehicle. At 8 minutes and 27 seconds, SpaceX telemetry updates ceased, with the numbers on screen freezing. What happened next became clear thanks to footage shared by multiple sources on X. The videos show Ship 33 losing control completely and possibly being terminated by the Turks and Caicos. Witnesses reported streaks of light across the sky and a rare jellyfish effect as debris from the ship re-entered the atmosphere illuminated by sunlight. The visible debris indicated that Ship 33 exploded, breaking into 3 large pieces that continued to fragment into smaller ones as they descended. All of this could point to the possibility of a gas leak, as Elon stated shortly afterward. Preliminary indication is that we had an oxygen fuel leak in the cavity above the ship engine firewall that was large enough to build pressure in excess of the vent capacity. Although the root cause of the issue has essentially been identified and many lessons have been learned, we have to acknowledge that SpaceX effectively did not have the opportunity to conduct its attended tests on the first Starship V2. As a result, Flight 8, previously predicted to be a Catch Starship mission, may now see this effort pushed back to Flight 9. The timeline for the next 2 flights remains uncertain as SpaceX is currently under investigation by the FAA, the agency responsible for issuing flight licenses. In a statement January 17th, the FAA confirmed it would require SpaceX to do an incident investigation for the Starship Super Heavy test flight. The FAA is requiring SpaceX to perform a mishap investigation into the loss of the Starship vehicle during launch operations January 16th, the agency said. There are no reports of public injury, and the FAA is working with SpaceX and appropriate authorities to confirm reports of public property damage. The FAA did not provide specific reports regarding the property damage, but there have been online posts from individuals in the Turks and Caicos claiming to have found debris that they believe originated from Starship, which includes the distinctive hexagonal tiles used in the vehicle's thermal protection system. There are no reported injuries and reports of only minimal property damage at this time, the National Security Secretariat of the Government of Turks and Caicos Islands said in a Jan 17th statement. It urged people who found debris to avoid handling it and contact the government officials. Like many across the Turks and Caicos Islands, I shared the concern caused by the outfall of debris in bright colors in the sky yesterday evening, Delaney Daniels Civiltarnum, governor of the islands, a British territory, told the local publication on January 17th. She said the government was working with the FAA as well as the UK Space Agency to investigate any potential risks. The FAA also confirmed in its statement the debris from the incident fell outside of the designated areas. During the event, the FAA activated a debris response area and briefly slowed aircraft outside the space where space vehicle debris was falling or stopped aircraft at their departure location. Several aircraft requested to divert due to low fuel levels while holding outside impacted areas, the agency said. A debris response area is activated only if space vehicle experiences an anomaly with debris falling outside of the identified closed aircraft hazard areas, the FAA added. It allows the FAA to direct aircraft to exit the area and prevent others from entering. According to Aviation Tracking Services, several dozen aircraft had to alter their flight paths in response to the incident. That ranged from planes going into holding patterns till the airspace reopened the flights that diverted back to their original airports or to another airport. SpaceX, though, said the debris would not have fallen outside designated zones. Starship flew in the designated launch corridor, as all U.S. launches do, to safeguard the public both on the ground, water, and in the air, the company said on the page devoted to the mission. Any surviving pieces of debris would have fallen into the designated hazard area. In the end, SpaceX took the lead in the investigation, as the company confirmed. Data review is already underway as we seek out root cause. We'll conduct a thorough investigation in coordination with the FAA and implement corrective actions to make improvements on future Starship test flights. Following this, the FAA will provide a list of corrective actions the company needs to take before Starship can return to the launch pad for another test. The situation seems to have been neatly handled by SpaceX, showcasing their ability to quickly address issues during an investigation. However, many still blindly believe SpaceX is directly harming people by the debris falling from Ship 33. Given the current situation, it is easy to predict that SpaceX's future could face legal battles related to their recent flight. But is the explosion of Starship 33 really that dangerous? According to a pilot who shared info with the space community about the safety protocols for Starship 7. For Starship 7's launch, the FAA issued a NOTAM, Notice to Airmen, featuring a closed airspace area around the launch site and a broader warning area across Starship's planned trajectory. The vehicle's rapid unscheduled disassembly happened within the designated warning area, which raises the question, why wasn't the airspace entirely closed from the beginning? The reason lies in altitude calculations. SpaceX and the FAA planned for Starship's altitude throughout its trajectory. At the time of the explosion, Starship was already in space, about 90 miles above Earth. Most commercial airliners fly a lot lower, with a maximum cruising altitude of approximately 41,000 feet or around 7 miles. The explosion, though visibly dramatic, posed no immediate risk to planes flying at those lower altitudes. The debris event occurred more than 83 miles above them. What happens next? When Starship's disassembly occurred, SpaceX immediately notified the FAA. In turn, the FAA activated the warning area and air traffic control redirected planes away from the affected zone. These procedures and contingency plans are carefully calculated well in advance of any launch. This isn't about hoping for airliner safety, it's about ensuring it by design. Anytime airspace restrictions occur, whether for a presidential moment, a Super Bowl, or military ops, it can lead to delays. However, since the NOTAM for Starship 7 was issued beforehand, airlines had the opportunity to prepare. They could plan alternate routes, carry extra contingency fuel, or plan for potential diversions. From a pilot's point of view, this type of planning is routine, much like navigating around thunderstorms. On this day, a small number of planes got rerouted, held, or experienced minor ground stops. In context, only a few dozen flights were impacted compared to the hundreds typically delayed by a Houston thunderstorm or a presidential fundraiser. Although the dramatic footage of Ship 33's explosion has surfaced, including impressive cockpit shots, it's important to understand that space debris often appears closer than it really is. Many viewers have misunderstood the distance of the debris because estimating distance at high altitudes is a challenge for those without proper training. In reality, the debris was miles away from any aircraft. After all, the FAA did its job and SpaceX adhered to protocol. The mechanical issue led to the disassembly has already been identified, and SpaceX is working to fix it to keep its launch cadence on track. While the visuals were spectacular, the reality is that safety was a top priority, meticulously managed by both the FAA and SpaceX. Following the challenges of Starship Flight 7, SpaceX has gained valuable lessons in the development of Starship's program. Although the outcome of Ship 33's flight did not fully meet expectations, the nature of test flights inherently carries high risks and opportunities for learning. Ship 33 represents a leap forward in the evolution of Starship, not just in technological advancements, but also in how SpaceX continues to push the boundaries of aerospace engineering. The critical upgrades equipped on Ship 33, such as redesigned forward flaps to enhance aerodynamics, improved avionics for greater reliability and real-time responsiveness, and an optimized methane piping system to provide more efficient fuel delivery to the Raptor engines, are testaments to SpaceX's innovation. Each detail in this new design aims to bring Starship closer to becoming the most reliable transport system in history. More importantly, the data collected from this flight will not only help identify the root cause of the anomaly, but also provide insights to improve performance and safety in future launches. The challenges encountered during testing also serve as opportunities for SpaceX to refine and progress towards goals like transporting cargo and humans to the Moon and Mars. This setback serves as a powerful reminder that true innovation is rarely a smooth journey. Embracing failure is an essential part of advancing cutting-edge technology. For SpaceX, each failure is not an endpoint, but a stepping stone toward building stronger solutions. This philosophy not only fosters a culture of learning, but also reflects SpaceX's long-term vision of shaping the future of space exploration. As SpaceX pushes forward with its iterative development of Starship, preparations for Flight 8 are underway. Ship 34 is at the center of these efforts with a possible launch targeted next month. Engineers are actively applying the lessons learned from Flight 7, focusing on modifications to address issues like engine reliability and fire suppression. These adjustments aim to enhance vehicle performance and safety, demonstrating SpaceX's commitment to refining its systems through rapid prototyping and testing. In parallel, significant infrastructure developments continue at Starbase. A second launch tower is under construction, signaling the expansion of SpaceX's operational capacity. This tower will incorporate the Chopsticks system designed to catch and manage boosters and starships more efficiently. As this new hardware takes shape, it reflects SpaceX's broader vision of creating a scalable and reusable launch system to support future missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. The advancements in both vehicle and infrastructure underline the company's ambitious trajectory toward making space travel more accessible and routine. If SpaceX engineers are the first to immediately begin analyzing Starship after its flight, then NASA's the second entity most interested in the matter. Thus, following the conclusion of Starship Flight 7 and hearing the explanation from SpaceX and Elon Musk regarding the reasons behind the explosion of the Starship upper stage, NASA's response is what we are most eager to know. So SpaceX launched its massive, super heavy Starship rocket on the 7th test flight Thursday, successfully catching the first stage booster back at the pad. However, it lost the next-gen Starship upper stage, which broke apart while ascending into space. Debris from the destroyed Starship temporarily disrupted traffic departing from Miami, Florida, according to federal officials. This highlights that what happened to the second stage of Starship poses concerns for public operations beyond the designated danger zones around the launch site. This, of course, has led to an FAA investigation into the launch, and we're going to have to wait for updates from the agency to see what happens next. Despite this or criticism from some uninformed about space exploration, SpaceX and Elon have received congrats for the success of this flight. Notably, the most prominent of messages came from NASA. Bill Nelson, the outgoing NASA admin, posted a congratulatory message to SpaceX shortly after the flight wrapped up. Congratulations to SpaceX on Starship's 7th test flight and the second successful booster catch. Spaceflight is not easy, it's anything but routine. That's why these tests are so important, each one bringing us closer on our path to the moon and onward to Mars through Artemis. Elon later shared Nelson's message and expressed his gratitude, demonstrating to everyone the strong relationship and mutual trust between the two largest space organizations in the world. To be honest, while this marks the 7th fully integrated launch of this rocket, SpaceX's Starship program is still developing. Past successes don't always guarantee more in the future, and we've seen this with Flight 6, where the tower canceled the attempt to catch the booster, despite Flight 5 showing an almost perfect catch. When testing new technology, of which there's plenty on every Starship flight, anything can go wrong. From the first flight and likely for a few more, the entire goal of Starship launches has been to gather data on how the rocket performs in flight. Thus, this outcome may have been anticipated by SpaceX, and for each of us, losing the spacecraft doesn't mean regret. Instead, it should inspire anticipation for what's to come, as it serves as a valuable lesson for SpaceX to get better this year. It stands as a milestone, ensuring that the new year doesn't stay uncertain, as some Alpha Tech viewers might have commented. In 2025, SpaceX officials hope to conduct up to 25 test flights throughout the year, evaluating new designs and attempting to recover Starship from orbit and demonstrate orbital refueling capabilities, an essential step for NASA and SpaceX's plans to get astronauts to the moon later this decade. SpaceX designed Starship to be fully reusable, with a capability to transport more than 100 tons of cargo to low Earth orbit. Future iterations of the spacecraft are envisioned for travel to the moon and Mars. If SpaceX can launch Starship again as early as next month, the company could stay on track with its ambitious program goals set for the year. Hardware availability is not a concern. Multiple Starships and Super Heavy boosters are either ready or nearing readiness for future test flights at the company's Starbase launch facility near Brownsville, Texas. And if all goes well, SpaceX could attempt to launch a Starship into LEO during its 8th test flight. All previous test flights for Starship intentionally followed a suborbital trajectory, returning the vehicle to waters northwest of Australia after completing half an orbit around the Earth. Later this year, a larger Starship version known as Block 3 could start flying. This version is designed for testing orbital refueling, a groundbreaking capability. For these refueling tests, 2 Starships will dock in orbit, allowing one to transfer supercooled methane and liquid oxygen to the other. This has never been attempted at such a scale before. Future Starship missions to the Moon and Mars may require 10 or more tanker missions to refuel the spacecraft in low Earth orbit. Each of these missions will involve variations of the same basic Starship design: a crewed lunar lander, a propellant depot, and a refueling tanker. The near-term lunar mission will showcase Starship's standout capabilities, as NASA is eagerly anticipating its success. In an interview with Lisa Watson-Morgan, the NASA engineer overseeing the agency's contract with SpaceX to develop a modified version of Starship for getting astronauts to the moon, she expressed great anticipation for everything SpaceX could do in the future. When asked about the progress of the Starship moonlander, she shared her excitement about the positive collaboration and progress between NASA and SpaceX. "We've been working with them on ground tests for this past year. We've seen the ground testing and reviewed the data. Our team works with them on what we deem necessary for the various milestones. Where the milestone contains proprietary info, we work closely with them to ensure that it's going to meet the intent, safety-wise as well as technically, of what we're going to need to see. So they've done that. She also revealed that SpaceX recently transported some of its docking systems to the Johnson Space Center for testing with the Orion Lockheed Martin docking system, which is part of the Artemis 3 mission. This illustrates NASA's plans for Starship to get crew from Orion. Additionally, Lisa Watson-Morgan mentioned the variety of tests conducted by NASA and SpaceX last year, noting that their efforts were not solely focused on rockets and spacecraft. There are many crew systems being developed right now, she added, highlighting the extensive scope of their collaboration. We're in work with them on how we're going to effectuate the crew manual control requirements we have, so it's great balance to see what the crew needs given the size of the ship. That's been a great set of work. We have crew office hours where the crew travels to Hawthorne and works one-on-one with different responsible engineers in the different technical disciplines to make sure that they understand not just little words on a paper from a requirement, but actually what it all means and how the systems can then be operated. Ultimately, the process of reaching the moon will proceed as planned. However, landing on the moon with Starship is far more complex than it was in the Apollo days. Back then, a single Saturn V launched both the lunar lander and the orbiting command module at the same time, with two spacecraft connected as they went to the moon. Artemis program, on the other hand, is going to be a multi-step event involving two rockets, SLS and Starship working in tandem. Starship launches first. Once its upper stage gets partway to Earth orbit, the Super Heavy booster separates and then lands back on Earth. The upper stage will then use its own array of 6 engines to power its way to orbit. Doing this will exhaust most of its fuel, but its gas tank won't be empty for long. Ready and waiting for it will be a fuel depot launched into orbit by SpaceX, where Starship will rendezvous to refill itself sufficiently to power its way out of Earth orbit to the moon and then down to the moon's surface and then back up. The only thing missing, of course, are the astronauts. Once Starship's entered lunar orbit, it will, as Lisa Watson-Morgan puts it, loiter there. A crew of 4 astronauts will then ride the Orion spacecraft launched atop the SLS out to the moon and dock with a waiting Starship. 2 of the crew members will then transfer to Starship and descend to the surface. Watson-Morgan is excited about the Starship's ability to stick the lunar landing despite any ruggedness of the terrain because of a feature SpaceX is designing into the spacecraft's 4 landing legs. Each leg has active and independent control authority, she says. So if one lands higher up on a rock or a ledge or something, it can level itself with the others. Assuming that the system works and all goes well, 2 lunar explorers will spend just under a week on the surface before lifting off and redocking with Orion. All 4 astronauts then fly home on Orion, while Starship stays in the lunar vicinity as a very pricey piece of space junk. All these moving parts are being developed in the service of a larger vision for lunar exploration. NASA intends to eventually launch a mini lunar space station known as Gateway to act as sort of a way station for future Orions and Starship. A central travel hub like that will serve the multiple landings NASA envisions for Artemis 4, 5, 6, and beyond. The first Gateway module will be launched aboard yet another SpaceX rocket, the 27-engine Falcon Heavy. Once Gateway's in operation, NASA intends to move away from exclusive reliance on Starship for its human landing system. The space agency is now opening the door for other bidders to build a second lander to provide services along with Starship, with Blue Origin and Dynetics as the 2 contenders. In the statement at the time of the announcement in March of 2022, Lisa Watson-Morgan said that this will help the Artemis program advance as flights to the moon get more frequent and complex, giving flexibility and redundancy. Adds pace straightforwardly. If one goes down, I got another. Multiple landers will also help with NASA's ultimate goal, establishing a permanent base on the moon. It's that kind of multiplicity of options that gives other space experts, unlike Mustashar, confidence that NASA has not allowed Elon and SpaceX to become too central to its operations. We've never had so many missions as we have today, says astrophysicist Pascal Ehrenfreud, a professor at George Washington University Space Policy Institute. That's because there's cooperation between NASA and SpaceX and other companies. It makes the entire exploration era versatile and dynamic. De Leon agrees that the faster other companies come online and get their hardware flying, the better off NASA will be. It's smart for NASA to keep its options open, he says. You don't want to put your eggs in one basket. Of course, the basket that is Starship has itself yet to fly, and until it does, NASA's Artemis plans and Elon's dreams of Mars are just that, plans and dreams. De Leon, while not predicting if the first flight will be successful, does believe Starship has the engineering credibility to work as planned. Elon has shown that he's a careful designer and his team is certainly capable, he says. I don't think they'd be doing this design if they didn't go through the necessary process to prove it's feasible now. Every Mars mission plan you've ever looked at says that you need to build the biggest rocket you possibly can, says Pace. Musk has done just that. Before long, the giant machine will prove it's up to the jobs that have been assigned to it. What an extraordinary week it has been, marked by two monumental launches from the giants of the U.S. space industry. We got Blue Origin's New Glenn and then SpaceX's Starship Flight 7 happening just hours apart from each other. These two groundbreaking events, occurring just hours apart, have ignited some pretty spirited discussions in the space community. For some of us space enthusiasts, these represent victories for both companies, contributing to the collective progress of the industry. However, others seem to think that Blue Origin's New Glenn debut was maybe more successful than SpaceX's Starship Flight 7. So, how should we objectively assess this perspective? And how did leaders like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos react to these events? Rocket science has always been an exceedingly iterative process, one in which a whole lot of launches have to come to ruin before the engineers get things right. During the early days of NASA, nearly half the Atlas boosters that lofted the Mercury astronauts to space failed their test flights before they were finally rated safe to carry people. The Titan missiles that launched the two-man Geminis practically shook themselves to pieces in their first uncrewed flights. As for the celebrated Saturn V, this magnificent machine that launched the Apollo astronauts to the moon, this was a disaster, Chris Kraft, NASA's director of flight operations, told the press in '68 after the final uncrewed flight of Saturn V almost crash-landed in the ocean. I want to emphasize that. It was a disaster. However, the Atlas, Titan, and Saturn rockets ultimately did fly, and if spaceflight history is any guide, the explosions of new rockets often pave the way for their manufacturers to achieve success. This is precisely what we anticipate for Starship and New Glenn, as both rockets faced similar outcomes during their latest test launches. January 16th, Blue Origin did the maiden flight of the New Glenn rocket, carrying a payload to space for the first time. With a strong start, New Glenn achieved success in its initial launch as its upper stage successfully delivered the payload to orbit. However, the first stage, which was expected to land gently on a low-altitude barge, ended up plunging into the Atlantic. Just a few hours later, SpaceX's Starship lifted off from Texas, aiming to accomplish some ambitious objectives. The result, however, was like a reverse script compared to Blue Origin. Starship's first stage was successfully recovered between the enormous chopstick arms on the pad at Starbase, but its second stage was lost in a rather dramatic explosion. 8 minutes and 27 seconds into the flight, Starship experienced a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, the company euphemistically posted on X. Overall, looking at the two launches from a broader perspective, both giants and even longtime competitors had their share of both successes and setbacks. Neither launch was definitively more successful than the other, as both also faced FAA investigations after losing their vehicles. Any comparison between the two would be inherently skewed. Now, I understand that SpaceX encounters issues with Starship. The consequences are a bit more evident than losing the first stage of New Glenn. But the reality is, Starship is 3 times bigger than New Glenn. If New Glenn's categorized as a heavy lift, then Starship is a super heavy lift rocket. While New Glenn took over a decade to do its maiden flight, Starship hit this milestone in only 5 years. Now, some are going to say that Blue Origin was bold in aiming for orbital insertion and rocket landing on the first launch, so losing the booster shouldn't be an issue. But quite frankly, achieving orbit is something that Blue Origin really should have done a long time ago. Their delays and issues have resulted in Bezos' company taking 25 years to even get to orbit. Only now has New Glenn managed to do something SpaceX routinely does with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. It's too late for such a major player in the spaceflight industry. As time goes on, their objectives must grow, and successfully landing the booster alongside achieving orbit on the first flight should have been non-negotiable. During Blue Origin's broadcast of the New Glenn launch, did we see Jeff Bezos looking genuinely happy? He didn't smile, and he stood with his arms crossed, intently watching the flight. I'm not trying to call him out, but that was the clearest display of dissatisfaction when the company lost New Glenn's first stage. Bezos didn't post much about the flight after, mainly sharing visually impressive videos of New Glenn's liftoff. In stark contrast, Elon is an unruffled leader. When his colossal rocket explodes, Elon's response is predictably positive and reassuring. Of course, he doesn't forget to promise improvements for the next one. The reactions of these leaders alone show the relative success of their ventures. Ultimately, SpaceX is a dominant force in all space launches. Even though New Glenn got to orbit, it still has a long way to go before getting those high-cadence launches that SpaceX has mastered. Space is an industry where collaboration is vital for mutual progress. Both Elon and Bezos seem to have understood this and appear to have set aside their previous rivalries. The two leaders now congratulate each other after their respective launches. Acknowledging one another's achievements and competing fairly, that's a key factor in advancing this industry further. That said, it reminds us of Blue Origin filing a lawsuit against SpaceX last year when SpaceX tried to get approval for 44 launches in Florida. Surely that's an issue laid to rest now, right? Well, just a joke, but it's probably going to be a while before we revisit this topic because Starship isn't yet stable enough to start operations in Florida. We'll wait and see what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel for timely updates on that. If you do have any feedback about this video, please leave a comment and we will work to improve it. Among the two new rockets tested last week, New Glenn stands as the one with the most to prove. Developed by Blue Origin, the space company founded by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos back in 2000, New Glenn represents a critical piece of Bezos' ambitious vision. He envisions Blue Origin as a regular provider of space transport services for both cargo and crew, while also playing a vital role in transforming humanity into a multi-planetary species with millions eventually living and thriving in space. While the company successfully launched 28 new Shepard suborbital rockets for missions that included scientific payloads and 9 crewed flights, it never placed any payload to orbit until now. This achievement highlights a stark contrast with SpaceX, whose Falcon 9s have completed an astonishing 423 successful launches, while its larger Falcon Heavy's flown 11 times. Even Starship, still in the experimental phase, has already completed 7 flights. New Glenn's been in development for over 10 years, with its first flight originally projected for 2020. Unlike the rapid research and development pace of SpaceX's Falcon series, New Glenn has followed a more deliberate trajectory. Despite these delays, the rocket's design and capabilities justify the wait by many measures. The rocket's first stage is powered by 7 BE-4s that burn methane, a cleaner and more efficient fuel than the kerosene used in Falcon 9. Combined, the engine produces 3.8 million pounds of thrust, positioning New Glenn among the most powerful rockets ever made. For comparison, this is half the thrust of NASA's Saturn V and slightly less than the 5 million pounds of thrust generated by SpaceX's Falcon Heavy. Despite these figures, New Glenn's undeniably a muscular contender in the world of heavy lift rockets. A single BE-4 turbo pump can fit in the backseat of a car, wrote Limp on X, but when all 7 fuel pumps and oxygen from the BE-4's common shaft, they produce enough HP to propel 2 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers at full tilt. Despite the setback of failing to land its first stage during its maiden flight, New Glenn was designed with reusability as a core feature. Each booster can withstand up to 25 flights, significantly cutting long-term costs. Plus, the rocket's engineered to carry a wide range of payloads, from large cargo shipments to future crewed missions, making it a versatile addition to Blue Origin's portfolio. With SpaceX having firmly established its dominance in the commercial launch sector, Blue Origin often feels like an afterthought by comparison. While both companies are pivotal players in the modern space race, SpaceX has consistently outpaced its competitors in innovation, scale, and sheer ambition. Its Starship program in particular has broken numerous records and redefined what's possible in space exploration. The company operates with a bold philosophy of fly fast, fail fast, fly again, a strategy that's propelled it to achieve milestones that seemed unimaginable just a decade ago. Since 2023, SpaceX has conducted 7 Starship launches, a frequency that easily eclipses the slow and methodical pace of NASA's Space Launch System, SLS. NASA itself has demonstrated its confidence in Starship, selecting its upper stage as the HLS for the Artemis III. This iteration of Starship will serve as the 21st century equivalent of the Apollo module, designed to safely ferry astronauts to the moon and back to orbit. It's a monumental endorsement of space's technology and a testament to the company's ability to deliver the goods on ambitious goals. Currently, most of Falcon 9's workload involves transporting cargo and crew to the ISS. However, with the ISS set to be decommissioned and deorbited by the end of the decade, Falcon 9's utility may diminish, especially if Starship has matured into a reliable, high-frequency launch vehicle by then. Rumors suggest that SpaceX may phase out Falcon 9 entirely after the ISS era, focusing all efforts on Starship. This would signal a transformative shift in the launch industry, as Starship's capabilities and cost efficiency could redefine the market. For Blue Origin, this scenario represents a challenge and an opportunity. Its New Glenn rocket, which has yet to make its inaugural flight, will need to find its place in a world dominated by a high flight rate Starship. A competitive environment where both Starship and New Glenn operate regularly to LEO, the Moon, and beyond could foster growth in the commercial launch market. It would also solidify the U.S. as the global leader in space access, especially as international alternatives face numerous hurdles. Chinese rockets are not viable options for Western customers due to geopolitical tensions and regulatory barriers. Russian rockets, once a mainstay of commercial launches, have largely disappeared from the market in the wake of economic sanctions and geopolitical isolation. While Japanese H-3 rockets and Europe's Ariane 6 may welcome U.S. business, they currently can't compete with SpaceX on cost and reliability. The impending rise of New Glenn further complicates their prospects, as Blue Origin's heavy-lift vehicle aims to challenge SpaceX with competitive pricing and reusability. Even as fragments of debris from recent launch mishaps continue to fall to the ocean, both SpaceX and Blue Origin are relentlessly preparing for their next missions. The setbacks, while dramatic, are part and parcel of the high-risk, high-reward nature of space exploration. Each flight is an adventure filled with challenges, pushing the boundaries of engineering and human ingenuity. SpaceX and Blue Origin are not just building rockets. They are reshaping the space industry and charting paths for humanity's expansion into the cosmos. SpaceX, with its rapid iteration and aggressive timelines, is revolutionizing access to space, while Blue Origin, with its methodical and long-term approach, is laying the groundwork for sustainable commercial and scientific activities in space. In this unfolding narrative, the competition between these two giants is driving innovation at a pace rarely seen before. From the Earth to the Moon and eventually Mars, they're playing dual roles as rivals and pioneers. A bold era for space exploration, and the stakes have never been higher. After resolving the issues surrounding Starship Flight 7, SpaceX has quickly shifted focus to upgrading Starship's launch infrastructure in preparation for the next major steps. The most notable development is the construction of the second Mechazilla tower at Starbase. Previously, many assumed that Tower B would be identical to Tower A, but recent updates have revealed surprising changes, signaling a new plan for Starship. These innovations are so impressive that even Russia, a leading space power, has been left astonished. So, what exactly are these changes? What's SpaceX's new plan for Starship? Recent images and footage have provided a glimpse into the ongoing construction of progress at Launch Pad B in Starbase. Before Flight 7, Tower B was largely unremarkable, just a bare structure with little to indicate its future role. However, just a few days back, we got a closer look at the chopsticks getting prepared for installation on the new tower. What stands out is these chopsticks are different. They appear noticeably shorter compared to those on Tower A, raising questions about SpaceX's evolving strategy. So, what's driving this unexpected change? The first and most important reason lies in SpaceX's revised plans for Starship. For many years, SpaceX and Elon Musk have championed the idea of launching and catching Starship using the Mechazilla tower. This approach is designed to drastically reduce rocket turnaround time, enabling a rapid increase in the frequency of Starship launches. However, recent developments suggest that the plan has been refined. You recall the permit SpaceX submitted to the FAA last year? It was seeking approval for 44 launches from Florida. In that document, updated plans for LC-39A revealed the addition of 2 launch towers, each with its own purposes. While there was much speculation about these changes, it's now evident that SpaceX is implementing its revised strategy at Starbase, Texas. Let's start by looking at Ship 33, the first Starship equipped with hardware tailored specifically for the catching process. The journey to develop Starship's catching system is taking an intriguing turn with the tests of Ship 33. While many focused on the visible hardware, the real story lay in the seemingly simple catch points mounted on the vehicle. Though these weren't built to support a full landing, they served a more subtle but crucial role, gathering vital data about how the catch system would handle the intense heat of re-entry. SpaceX's engineers weren't just testing temporary parts, they were quietly validating the thermal performance of what would become the final design. A closer look at Tower A reveals why it likely won't be the star of Starship's first catch attempt. The tower's catch arms, while impressive, have a fundamental design quirk. Their contact plates don't reach low enough to safely catch Starship. It's like trying to catch a basketball with a shelf that's slightly too high. The geometry just doesn't work out. The gap between the arm and the landing rail's lip is too tight for comfort, creating a puzzle that needed some solving. If someone tried to force a catch with Tower A's current setup, it would be like trying to parallel park in a space that was too tight. Something is gonna get scratched. The catch fitting would likely collide with the parts it was never meant to touch, potentially damaging the delicate thermal tiles. Even worse, the sheer weight of Starship pressing against the landing rail's lip could compromise the very infrastructure meant to secure it. The contrast gets even clearer when comparing this to how Super Heavy boosters are caught. The booster's catch system uses a beefy cylindrical contact point that just barely clears the landing's rail lip. It's a tight fit, but it works. Meanwhile, Starship's rectangular contact plate's only about a third of that size. Trying to use this smaller plate with Tower A would be like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. The proportions just don't add up. And that's where Tower B enters the picture, looking increasingly like the hero of our story. Rather than forcing Starship to conform to existing infrastructure, SpaceX seems to have taken the smarter route, building a tower that matches Starship's needs. The fact that they stuck with S-33's catch point design throughout the testing speaks volumes. It suggests they always planned to adapt the tower to the ship, rather than the other way around. The whole evolution feels natural when you step back and look at it. Instead of compromising Starship's design to fit old infrastructure, SpaceX seems to be following a forms-follow-function approach. Tower B is not just a backup, it's likely the purpose-built solution that'll bring the Starship safely back to Earth. These changes are not just speculative, they become evident when we take a closer look at the chopsticks. Big shoutouts to Starship Gazer for giving us these awesome photos documenting every stage of Starship's development, and also Ryan Hansen's Space for detailed analysis that allows us to share this valuable info with space enthusiasts. Make sure you give them a follow on X and YouTube. In the close-up images of the chopsticks, we can clearly observe changes in the landing rail hardware. The most striking change is the reduced lip height of the landing rails, roughly estimated to be at 1/4 to 1/5 the size of Tower A's design. And that's not just a minor tweak, it's a purposeful modification that appears perfectly matched to accommodate the catch hardware we previously saw tested on Starship S-33. We also need to consider the construction timeline at Launchpad B. SpaceX is notably focused on getting the arms and tower components ready, while other elements like the SQD arm have taken the backseat. A swift movement of the arms and carriage to the tower shortly after Flight 7 suggests a sense of urgency, as if SpaceX had initially hoped to use these components for Flight 8 or 9. While Flight 7's outcome may have altered immediate catch plans, the rapid pace of arm installation continues. The logistics of operating with a single pad creates some fascinating challenges. Current evidence suggests that to catch both the booster and ship during the same mission, SpaceX would need to clear the booster from the orbital launch mount before attempting a ship catch. This choreography becomes even more complex at Pad A due to the specific orientation, which might make simultaneous booster and ship presence particularly challenging. Additionally, Flight 7 gave valuable insights into post-catch operational timelines. Many observers had anticipated faster handling of Booster 14 compared to Booster 12, particularly regarding its positioning on the OLM and defueling processes. While the operations of B-14 did show some improvements in speed, they were not significantly faster than expected, a critical detail when you consider future requirements for rapid turnaround in catch sequences. Overall, the upgrades represent the latest advancements, giving us hope for the continued development of the Starship program. The broader development roadmap indicates that SpaceX is building toward more complex catch operations while maintaining flexibility in its approach. Although immediate catch attempts may not follow the results of Flight 7, infrastructure development continues at a steady pace. Modified hardware, accelerated construction timelines, and operational improvements all point to a carefully coordinated effort to establish robust catching capabilities for upcoming flights. SpaceX's approach to this development, modifying hardware based on test results, refining operational processes, and building infrastructure ahead of demand, demonstrates their hallmark strategy of parallel development and rapid iteration. While specific flight plans and orbital timelines have yet to be revealed, the clear progress on Tower B suggests that they are working toward well-defined operational goals, even as they remain adaptable to testing outcomes. It's hoped that the FAA's investigation will conclude swiftly, as there were no reports of damage from the Ship 33 explosion. SpaceX has even ensured that all debris fell within the designated flight zone. Moreover, at this time, Donald Trump has officially assumed office as President of the United States, and Elon Musk has taken on a role within the government. This development could exert pressure on the FAA to expedite the handling of rocket launch approvals. Looking further ahead, Trump and Musk appear poised to write the next chapter of U.S. space exploration history, with an ambitious agenda that includes setting humanity's first steps on Mars. However, many of their grandiose aspirations get cemented into official U.S. space policy, and what gets left on the launch pad remains to be seen. But analysts envision a lively few years from the partnership between Musk, the enthusiastic billionaire founder of SpaceX, and Trump, who exploited U.S. achievements in space during his first term for some spike-in-the-football-type flag-waving. Trump made Space Force the first new U.S. military service in 70 years and signed an EO reviving the dormant National Space Council for the first time since '93. At a rally in North Carolina in September, the president-elect was already clear about his expectations. "Elon, get those rocket ships going because we want to reach Mars before the end of my term," he said, urging Musk to hasten his already optimistic project for a crewed landing on Mars by 2028 and a self-sustaining community there within 20 years. In reality, the aspirations of Trump's second term are likely to be much more grounded, even though American astronauts are on the verge of getting back to the moon for the first time since 1972. Trump, of course, will relish the prospect of being in the White House when the U.S. flag is again planted on the moon, now scheduled for mid-2027 and in April next year, when Artemis 2 makes a planned crew flypath to the moon. But any substantial deviation from the agenda of the Biden administration, which some have predicted could include the cancellation of the over-budgeted and much-delayed Space Launch System rocket that's the backbone of NASA's Moon to Mars mission, could be slow to come or not at all. A key player in the direction of Trump's second-term agenda is going to be another billionaire entrepreneur, Jared Isaacman, nominated to be NASA administrator. He'll need to become a consensus builder in Congress and manage the space agency's increasingly intertwined and demanding relationships with international partners and private contractors, including Boeing and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. If confirmed, Jared's first order of business will be a top-to-toe review of where NASA's various programs, human spaceflight and research, stand. For that reason alone, other experts think that any immediate change of direction in U.S. space policy is unlikely. He needs to do a stock taking of where they are, looking at Artemis program and its cost and schedule, which is obviously a concern with China and their rapid progress, said Scott Pace, director of Space Policy Institute at GW University, who served as a secretary of the National Space Council during the first Trump administration. What changes come out of that initial hard look are still to be determined. The broad space policy brushstrokes are largely already present. Artemis, Space Force, relying on commercial, all that's fine. The real challenge now for this term is really implementation and execution. Someone with Isaacman's strong tech skills, someone who's led a major organization like he has, and of course his personal spaceflight experience, he's walked the walk, not just talked about stuff. And I think that's what the agency needs. Everything is just the beginning. Let's wait and see how space exploration evolves under the new Trump administration. The billionaire space race has entered a new phase. Jeff Bezos' new Glenn has finally achieved what it should have done a long time ago. However, the failure in the rocket's first landing is undeniable. Why and how? After numerous delays, in the early hours of January 16th, the 7 reusable BE-4s of New Glenn roared to life, propelling the NG-1 into space. The second stage and payload successfully reached orbit, achieving the primary mission objective for Blue Origin. This milestone was a fundamental goal that Blue Origin execs had to accomplish, especially given the extensive development and production timeline of New Glenn. Nonetheless, it marks a resounding triumph for Blue Origin after a decade of effort. Ariane Cornell, Blue Origin's VP of Orbital Systems, expressed her pride. "Getting to orbit is hard. There are not many countries or companies that have been to orbit. And y'all, we did it on our first go. Congratulations. That is huge. We did it, Orbital. Great night for Team Blue. On to spring and trying again on the landing," said Dave Limp, CEO of Blue Origin, in a post on X. The launch garnered attention from Jeff Bezos' rival, Elon Musk, who not only wished New Glenn good luck before liftoff, but also warmly congratulated Blue Origin on their success afterwards. "Congratulations on reaching orbit on the first attempt." Bezos graciously responded with a message of thanks, indicating his satisfaction with this achievement. This first flight success was met with widespread acclaim from the space community across social media, as many of us have eagerly been awaiting New Glenn's debut despite a week of repeated delays. New Glenn's designed for partial reusability. While Blue Origin attempted to recover the booster stage and the ocean platform, the effort was unsuccessful. The booster's engines reignited to slow descent as it approached a ship stationed a few hundred miles out in the Atlantic, but the booster was ultimately lost. Blue Origin confirmed that the booster was lost during the landing attempt. Second stage engine cutoff confirmed. New Glenn's second stage and payload are now in orbit, another burn coming up. As for the cause of the failure, Blue Origin has yet to provide a direct explanation. The live stream of the landing got cut off during the descent, leaving the specifics unclear. However, based on the launch process and the engine's performance, there are notable points. The telemetry and visual data from the entry burn phase suggest a possible BE-4 engine anomaly. Several key indicators pointed to serious propulsion issues during the critical deceleration phase. Notably, the entry burn duration was approximately 15 seconds shorter than planned, and the observed deceleration effect was markedly reduced. Additionally, the engine plume exhibited characteristics consistent with fuel-rich combustion rather than maintaining the designed oxygen-rich mixture into a ratio typical of nominal BE-4 operation. New Glenn's architecture features an LOX tank positioned at the bottom of the booster, similar to SpaceX's Super Heavy design. During the aggressive maneuver required for entry burn orientation, this configuration may have induced propellant slosh. The animation of the maneuver showed an unusually dramatic and perhaps unrealistic flip maneuver prior to the entry burn initiation. The resulting propellant movement, particularly affecting the oxygen supply, likely led to a cascade of failure events. The suspected oxygen starvation would have severely impacted turbopump performance, potentially leading to a cavitation and catastrophic pump failure. The engine behavior observed aligns with this failure mode hypothesis. However, we're just speculating. Perhaps we're going to have to wait for the company to release more footage from the drone to evaluate how close the New Glenn booster came to its designated landing target. In the meantime, we can speculate on some potential reasons for this failure. The first possible cause might be an issue related to the rocket's propulsion during the landing phase. Engine performance must be precisely controlled during the landing burn, with any irregularities in thrust, fuel flow, or propellant management potentially leading to landing failures. The landing burn requires exact timing and thrust levels to achieve the proper descent rate, and any deviation can result in either a hard landing or missing the intended landing zone entirely. Guidance, navigation, and control, or GNC systems, form another critical component. These systems must work in perfect harmony to guide the rocket stage to its landing site. Any sensor failures, control system malfunctions, or navigation errors can compound throughout the descent phase. The rocket's computer systems need accurate real-time data about position, orientation, and velocity to make split-second adjustments during the landing attempt. Hardware and mechanical systems need to function flawlessly during the intense conditions of re-entry and landing. Landing legs need to deploy correctly. Grid fins must maintain full mobility for steering, and all structural components must withstand the thermal and aerodynamic stresses of descent. Weather conditions could have been a factor, but prior to the launch, Blue Origin had reported that the weather status was green, making it clear that this was not the primary cause of the failure. So, what do you think could have led to Blue Origin's unsuccessful landing attempt? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll discuss. Ultimately, landing a rocket remains one of the most challenging aspects, especially for a new vehicle like New Glenn. Even SpaceX required numerous failures to master the landing techniques. From the start, we really didn't place too much hope in Blue Origin achieving this milestone on the first go. Setting aside the failed booster landing, the debut of New Glenn signifies its entry into the realm of next-gen rockets, joining the ranks of SpaceX's Starship, ULA's Vulcan, and NASA's SLS. While SpaceX remains the leader in rocket reusability and heavy lift capability, it's evident that Blue Origin can stand as a serious player to Elon's company. This flight is also a big step towards gaining certification from the Pentagon to carry out national security missions. In June, DoD selected Blue Origin alongside SpaceX and ULA, a joint venture between Lockheed Martin and Boeing, to conduct a new round of missions valued at about $5.5 billion. However, before Blue Origin can take on any of those missions, New Glenn first needs to demonstrate that it can operate safely and reliably. The company aims to launch New Glenn up to 8 times this year and has ambitious plans to send an uncrewed spacecraft called Blue Moon to the moon's surface. In 2023, Blue Origin secured a $3.4 billion NASA contract to get astronauts on the moon's surface by the end of the decade. NASA also favors Blue Origin quite a bit. While SpaceX is seen as the primary launch provider for NASA and the military with its fleet of Falcon 9 rockets busy deploying Starlink communication satellites, NASA's counting on New Glenn, named after the astronaut John Glenn, for critical missions. These include deploying 2 spacecraft into orbit around Mars, and additionally, Blue Origin has other customers lining up, including AST Space Mobile, Telesat, and Amazon. The latter plans to launch a massive orbital constellation similar to Starlink, over 3,200 comm satellites under the Project Kuiper initiative. This is a big deal because we're finding ourselves in this area where the demand for the launch has not decreased, it's actually increased tremendously, said Mike French of the Space Policy Group. Founded 25 years ago, Blue Origin envisions a future of millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. Its mascot is a tortoise, a nod to the slow and steady fabled competitor that ultimately triumphs over the speedier hare, which today is an obvious metaphor for SpaceX. Now, more than 4 years later than its anticipated launch, New Glenn has finally flown. Although, for those keeping track, in 2015, Blue Origin did become the first company to successfully launch and land a rocket with New Shepard. This inaugural flight was designed to test a wealth of hardware: the rocket's upper payload stage, which this time carried a 45,000-pound payload demonstrator called the Blue Ring Pathfinder, and the reusable first-stage booster. Of all the challenges tackled on the morning of January 16th, achieving a successful landing was the most difficult. We know landing the booster on the first time is ambitious, but you know what? We're going for it, said Ariane Cornell, Blue Origin's vice president, during a launch webcast. You might even say we're a little crazy to try it on the first flight, but the data we get for flying the complete mission profile is incredibly valuable. Successful landings are also the most critical step towards realizing reusability, akin to what SpaceX has achieved with its rockets. Blue Origin designed its boosters to fly at least 25 times. Reusability is the future of launch. That's how you get to lower costs, said Clay Mowry, CEO of the American Institute of Aeronautics and former BO executive. You don't fly an airplane and throw it away after one use, he says. I think New Glenn's going to be a hugely important event for the whole space industry. It brings a lot of capability to the heavy lift end of the marketplace. At 7 meters, 23 feet wide, New Glenn's fairing is the most spacious available, doubling the volume of standard 5-meter rockets such as SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, ULA's Vulcan, and the now-retired Ariane 5, which launched NASA's James Webb Telescope, the JWST, on December 25, 2021. When JWST got launched, it had to be folded origami style inside Ariane 5, packed as tightly as possible to accommodate its delicate 21-meter sunshield when fully deployed. Teams spent days carefully guiding the telescope through a critical and complex deployment sequence involving 344 single points of failure. Larger rockets like New Glenn and SpaceX's Starship, currently in development, could eliminate the need for such extreme measures. Instead, cavernous payload fairings could ignite a different level of thinking about what might be possible from a space instrument perspective, says French, also former NASA Chief of Staff. To the extent that we get so much out of SpaceX, it will always be constrained somewhat by a launch. What can we fit? How big's the box? French said. There's such ingenuity, really just breakthroughs on the tech side that allow us to have these breakthroughs on the scientific side. It's always so impressive to meet and talk to the people that live at that intersection. So, how could larger rockets impact future science missions? NASA's already included New Glenn and Starship in its plans for the Habitable Worlds Observatory, a flagship telescope designed to search for signs of alien life on temperate Earth-sized exoplanets orbiting sun-like stars. Similarly, NASA's Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamic Explorers, or ESCAPADE, a pair of spacecraft set to orbit Mars, is slated to launch aboard New Glenn if its maiden flight occurs as scheduled in October. Of course, science missions aren't the only passengers on rockets of any size. The demand for orbital access for military payloads, national security assets, and commercial satellites for Earth observation or global communications far exceeds the needs of space scientists and their limited budgets. In reality, rockets like New Glenn are likely to see their customer base dominated by companies building massive satellite constellations like Starlink, Project Kuiper, OneWeb, and Telesat. The reason? Simple. Building these constellations requires launching numerous satellites in larger payload spaces, means fewer launches and reduced costs. Moreover, these satellites are not designed for long lifespans. As noted by experts, maintaining such constellations requires constant hardware refreshes in orbit, driving a high launch cadence. If you think of the market as a pyramid, The large commercial constellations form the base, creating the demand, they explain, while the max number of constellations that can safely coexist in orbit remains an open question. This demand creates room for less conventional and innovative applications, projects yet to be imagined for the future. And that's all.